over 25 years. And I started younger because I had a job during the summer in high school, and I developed a database program for our library system. It was a very poor school district, and they didn't have anyone else to do it. And I understood after I returned to see how they were doing that they had been using it for about 8 years after I left. So I guess it worked pretty well for them. It kept the inventory for the whole school district of all their library books. And insofar as starting in technology, I actually started when I was a child because my father, although he was a farmer's son, after he left the Army, he went to school to learn electronics, and so he became an electronics specialist for the civil service for the Air Force. So he did a lot of the electronics for cargo planes, fighter jets, I mean everything that the Army used, or the Air Force used, that is. And so when I was about 8 years old, he first taught me how to solder electronics, so I started that interest very early. You know, they weren't really that interesting. You know, it's interesting that in my life, one of the biggest feminists in my life was actually my father. He taught all of us equally. I had two older brothers. I was the youngest, only girl. But he would teach us all equally: mechanics, electronics, plumbing, roofing, you know, all the handiwork around it. But I was always the one who seemed to be the one who followed him around to help him with cars, and he and I put the roof on the family house. We had an old-fashioned branch-style roof, and so again, it was all about work ethic. My father would teach us that we had to put in a good day's work to earn the Lord's blessing. So it was pretty interesting. So I learned a lot, almost Renaissance style of skill work. Early in my career, especially, I did. Even in college, going to school, there was a higher amount of men in the technical classes than ladies, although I did have some lady professors, so that helped certainly. But yeah, even in classes, sometimes some of the guys would, uh, show me a little bit of sexism, I guess, making sure that the girl in the room understood what the professor was saying, that kind of thing. But that started disappearing once you establish that you have a brain and that you can do the work. We'd have a study group and team groups to complete programming, and we'd stay up all night programming, and they could see that I was doing more than my share of the work. And so then I start to get respect. And that kind of is how it was early in my career. At the start of every job, I had to establish myself, show that I knew what I was talking about. Occasionally in meetings, I might have a man, if it was a room full of guys and we're all technical, they would ask me to take notes, and I would assure them I was more than confident in their note-taking ability, that anyone else could take notes for the group. But a lot of times they would turn to me as the girl, thinking that I should play the role of secretary, and a lot of times I had to decide when it was not detrimental to my career to defer to someone else in the room and say, you know what, my handwriting's horrible, I really think someone else should take notes. So I tried to be as politic as I could. On occasion, even talking to fellow technical folks on the phone, I would get talked down to because I was a lady, and that was one thing that I simply wouldn't put up with, and sometimes I would even have to crassly explain to them that I could, think as well as any man. But I would always try to make myself fit in. I think one of the best compliments I had was, well, it was kind of a compliment, but I kind of a side compliment, that my guys that reported to me, I had a lot of gentlemen that reported me through my career in IT management. And sometimes they would forget I was just one of the guys. They just thought I was one of the guys, and I would do as much physical work, lifting servers, soldering electronics, pulling floor tiles. The only time they noticed was when I was heavily pregnant with my first child, and that I would start to lift or do something. The guys would just freak out, because they were like, "Oh my God, no, you can't do that. We keep forgetting you're not a guy." And I'm like, "No, that's fine. I can handle it." So that was always interesting. That balance. I do like my husband to open the door for me and make sure I get in the car correctly. I like to be treated like a lady, but at the same time, I don't want to be treated like I don't have a brain and that I can't do the technical work. Now, I will tell you that it's gotten a lot better. I'm in the Women in Technology group at my work. I've joined a few of the professional organizations in the country, like National Association for Female Executives and some of the other associations, and a lot of it is about networking. I'm proud to say that in the Women in Technology group, we have guys that like to further the interests of ladies and making sure that there's not any current sexism. We have a lot of diversity at the company I work at Capital One, and they celebrate it instead of pushing anyone with a diverse background down. So it's very nice to see the changes through the years. So it's gotten a lot better. So I'm proud to see that happen. It was nice because, especially during the summers and during winter break, I'd go out to my grandfather's ranch and got to um, work in the fields and work with the animals and such. And so it was very close to nature. And both of my grandparents on my father's side loved nature as well. Well, when I was about 7, I found a very pretty, colorful animal out in the field, and I picked it up somehow safely. I don't know how I did it, and I brought it to my mother, and she told me it was a coral snake, which is poisonous, but it's kind of not as fast moving as some of the other more dangerous snakes. And instead of chiding me for grabbing a snake, I don't know how I did it instinctively behind the head, but instead of chiding me for even playing with a dangerous animal, she instead asked me if I wanted to make a hat band for my father's cowboy hat. And so that was the start of a little mini enterprise we had out in the country, which was to rid our family 5-acre land from any bad snakes. So we'd catch coral snakes, copperheads, the occasional rare rattlesnake, and we would make hat bands and belts and such. And that was always an interesting adventure. She taught me how to do it safely so that I wasn't injured. So that was a unique part of my childhood. Yeah, because with my mother being Caucasian and my father also Caucasian but of Hispanic origin, he grew up in a very different time. I mean, when he was younger, signs that said whites only applied to him because he was very dark Hispanic, and so he faced a lot of prejudice growing up. This in turn caused him to um, basically tell us that we first had to learn English properly before we could learn a second language. Although we understood Spanish, we didn't speak it as much. And so when we did speak it, we had a bit of an accent. So sometimes we had some prejudice from the Hispanic side. But because my maiden name is Valderas, sometimes I'd have prejudice, I guess, from the Caucasian side as well. Also, the blending of the two cultures kind of was interesting, especially in the cooking. My mother would combine the Hispanic with common American foods. So it made it kind of interesting watching those two come together. Well, that was interesting because it was quite accidental. I wasn't looking for a husband at the time. I wasn't even dating. I grew up in a very religious household, and you don't date till you're ready to get married. And I was not ready to raise a husband yet, so I wasn't even looking. Back pre-internet, there's these things called bulletin board systems, which was basically a modem dial-up into a regular computer, and so it was usually one user at a time. And I had called a bulletin board system, or BBS as they were called back in our day, um, and it happened to be the chessboard. It was one that had software I needed to fix a problem at work, and I couldn't get the software to download. And I got notified by the system operator asking me if I needed any help, and I said yes, I did. And it happened to be Ken, who is my husband. And on the bottom of his screen, of course, he could see that I was a lady and single. So, and he happened to be divorced for, gosh, 4 years at the time. And so he helped me with my software. He asked if he could call me, and I said yes, I was at work, and that he could call me at my work office number, and he did. And we were able to fix the settings, modem settings over the phone. And when I was able to get my software, I said, "Oh, great! Wow, I owe you lunch." Not even thinking that this could be a ogre or a axe murderer. I had invited the gentleman to lunch unintentionally, And of course, being that he's a very determined man, he would not let that drop. So we did end up going to lunch, and we found out we had a lot of stuff in common. Same taste in music, both interested in technology. You know, both came from religious background. He was raised Southern Baptist, so it was an interesting start of an adventure.